My name is Gracie Amber, and I'm an intern here at the Center for the Study of Tennesseans in War, where our mission is to record and preserve the stories of Tennessee veterans so that we can make them accessible to the public, just like you all. Today, I'm very, very lucky to get to interview Mr. James Angel. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Like I said, my name is James Angel. I work here at the university as a Veterans Benefit Consultant in the Office of Veterans Benefits Administration. So I help other veterans with their VA benefits or anything they might need help with.
Awesome. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So tell me about where you were born and where you grew up.
Okay, so I was born in Morristown, Tennessee in 1998. And then we moved down to Georgia in 2003 or so. And I grew up in a town called Clarksville, Georgia. It's a relatively pretty small town, southern town. Your typical, everyone knows everybody. Not much to do at all.
Awesome. Did you, growing up, did you ever think that you would maybe want to serve in the military one day? Did you have any family influences or anything like that?
Definitely a lot of family influences. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and I'm a big historian myself. I've traced it back to the American Revolution, so we've always been kind of in some way or capacity serving.
That's awesome. And I know, and that's kind of how I was introduced to you is through your love for military history. Mm-hmm. When do you think you really started getting into that? Was that at a pretty young age, or was that maybe older in high school?
A pretty young age. I've always been a big nerd when it comes to history. My parents would take me to Chickamauga and stuff like that for my birthday. That's
awesome. So did you enlist right out of high school, or did you do something in between?
I enlisted right out of high school.
That's awesome. At what point in high school, or however old you were, did you decide, I think that enlistment I think that's what I'm going to go with. That's the option for me.
I think about around end of sophomore year in high school, I wanted to go to the military. I kind of always knew I wanted to go to the military, I think.
That's awesome. Did your school have any, JROTC programs or anything like that you were able to participate in?
They did, but I was a big band nerd. So I joined it my senior year, my last semester, so it didn't really do anything much for me.
That's awesome. I feel like it's definitely a spectrum, but I do feel like it is somewhat rare that we have people in here who are I just kind of knew from the get-go. So that is so awesome that you kind of knew that was your path at an early age. Mm-hmm. That's always really interesting. So once you enlist, tell me about how where were you sent, or did you complete training? How did that process go?
So went in 2016 to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That was where my basic was. It was really hot. It was in the middle of summer. Yeah. God awful.
Yeah, I believe you. I feel like we, from the outside looking in, especially with people who aren't familiar with, I didn't really grow up knowing anyone personally really, really well that was in the military. So I feel like my picture of what the military was really painted by movies and things like that. So we all have this idea, whether or not it's a misconception, that basic training is miserable, awful. How was your experience with that?
It had some bad parts, but you kind of just get to the point where you try to block it out and you just keep pushing to the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so after you completed training, where did you go?
I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and that's where I did my advanced individual training, or AIT. And I was there for a couple of months. And I was a motor transport operator, so I drove all sorts of trucks and vehicles for the Army.
Awesome. Is that the role that you kind of took on once you were officially done with all of your training?
I picked that before, in my enlistment process.
Right. That's awesome. And so throughout the bulk of your service, how long did you serve?
2 years active, and then I did a year in the National Guard.
That's awesome. And then so for the bulk of those 2 years, what was your everyday routine like? What was your role?
Being a motor transport operator, or 88 mic, is a code. A lot of driving. We take ammunition out to gun ranges for different units, taking food. It was a very constant. Hey, you have to wake up at 2 a.m. and go move some ammunition.
Yeah, and move. So was that kind of centralized in some local specific areas, or did you get to travel and see a lot of different parts of the country through doing that?
I was all in Fort Hood. Mm-hmm. That's where I was stationed. So
a little bit less fun, for sure, but still very interesting. Mm-hmm. Did you have any idea while you were in service of what you might want to do when you got out?
Always I wanted to do something with history. That's been my goal since I was a kid too. So my goal would one day be a history professor or teacher. So
that's awesome. And so I feel like that's a good segue. So for our audience who doesn't know, like, tell us about what you do, maybe that how you stay involved with history and that sort of thing.
I'm a big collector of militaria from about the Civil War to World War II is my main kind of focus. I have a whole room in my house just full of stuff, but I love stuff that has been identified to a person, researching them, finding out their story, because there's so much you can find out. Of course, as you guys know, they have a story that I think it needs to be told.
Yeah.
Because as a common soldier myself, I'm not going to be any history books, and neither are these guys. I think their name deserves to be said.
100%, absolutely. And I think it's just such a beautiful process of watching. It's like watching a number develop into a person that you almost feel like in a lot of ways. Of this was a picture on a page or a name written down, and now it's kind of evolved, at least in my mind, into some scraps of who an individual was. So that's so exciting. I might be wrong in asking this, but do you also participate in reenactments and things like that?
I do Revolutionary War all the way up to World War II, so I do a lot of stuff, kind of expensive hobby.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a fun hobby though. I said a couple weeks ago I just did one at Sergeant York State Park, the World War I weekend they had.
Do you do that with an organization or a specific group?
Hey, there's a couple different organizations I do it with. We call ourselves the Pall Mall Doughboys, and they're kind of grouped around this area. So
that's awesome. And so whenever you're doing these reenactments, typically what could that look like? I feel like we kind of see that in passing a lot, but a lot of people, especially people who aren't involved or don't go watch or participate in that way, what does that look like if you go to one of these reenactments, specifically as someone who's participating?
One of the things I mainly do is I like to do the living history aspect. I'm not too big in like the mock battles or anything like that. I like actual teaching people what the actual individual soldier look like, what they carried with them. I'm big into the personal effects. It's my big thing. So I usually have like a blanket or table. So actually in September, I got invited to go up to the U.S. Army War College in Pennsylvania. So
Army beat Navy.
Exactly.
I remember that.
So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm going to have a table set up talking about the National Guard during World War I. So I'm very excited.
That is so exciting. I'm a big Army fan by association. So that's really, really exciting. I kind of grew up in a way seeing reenactments and things like that. I grew up in Vonore, Tennessee. So there's the Fort Loudon State Historic Park and the Sequoia Birthplace Museum. And so every year they would do, they have like the fort that you can go visit and that sort of thing. And that was, I think, in a lot of ways, what got me into history as a kid, getting to like physically see, if not, in a textbook, it's like I get to hold this and see this and talk to people and like pretend that these are people who really lived in this time and really get to understand. How many kids do you feel like you find participating in these? I know that maybe it's a little bit different depending on the subject matter.
It really depends on the era. A lot of younger guys do World War II and Civil War. And I've been slowly noticing, like, since I've started back when I was a kid, I've been reenacting for over 10 years now. And a lot younger guys, which is a good thing. Yeah. Because, I mean, back then it was not a bunch of old guys, fighting. It was a bunch of young kids getting killed in these wars. I have no clue what they were doing, really. So
that's awesome. That is so cool. I think that's definitely something I am trying to make for a goal for myself to go, even if I don't like physically participate, to go see these things, especially, when we talk about public history. I think that we have this idea, first of all, a lot of people aren't big fans in public history and the academic space, for one. But when we think of it, I feel like we really limit ourselves to museums and things like that. But in reality, public history is it's books, it's reenactments. There's a whole range of what that can look like and how that can benefit the public. So I think that supporting things like that is a great way to do that.
I think it gets kids involved a lot, which is a good thing. We always need more historians. We always do. And seeing them, like, their face light up when I shoot off my rifle or something like that, it makes me really happy.
It is not a crime to make history fun. I feel like sometimes people act like it is, but it's not, and it can be fun in a lot of different ways. And so, and back to your collecting, I know that you'd given us some donations in the fall on an individual from World War I, if I'm not misremembering. How many individual collections, I guess I would say, do you have that you have from a specific person, if that makes sense.
From specific, I don't even know.
I know that's kind of a random question, but the reason I ask is because for those of you who don't know, the donations that he gave were different documents and pictures and things like that were all from one individual. And so I just wonder, how many times do you get to see like one individual represented in your collection with like a series of items maybe?
It's mainly like one item or two items most of the time. It's very rare to find like a big grouping like I shared with you guys.
Yeah, that's always been my dream. As a kid, we would go to like thrift stores and estate sales and antique stores and things like that and find things like that. And it's always been like a really big thing of mine to find a whole collection from an individual. My mom actually, we live currently in Madisonville, Tennessee. And so Keith Offer is obviously like my mom has his mom's trunk that she bought in an estate sale with a bunch of her belongings. And so stuff like that has always been really, really, really interesting to me. And so that is awesome. So tell us a little bit about your role here at the university and what you do for the Veteran Success Center.
So I'm the one that certifies the all the educational benefits for veterans if they're using like their GI Bill or any other benefit like that for dependents. So I send over that information to the VA, and then students will come to me if they have help with the VA, which is quite often, unfortunately, with no one in the VA, to help them with any issues they might have with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you go to any like schooling after your service? Did you get?
Yeah, I'm a bachelor's in history, and I went to Piedmont University
in Georgia.
Yes,
that is so funny that you say that. I have one of my close friends from home went to Piedmont and played basketball there for several years, and I think that her first year was the year that I went from a college to a university. Maybe
that's the year I graduated.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. Yeah. It's a kind of a smaller school, if I'm not wrong. So that's exciting to see that we have that connection. Yeah. Do you plan on like continuing to go to school in the future?
Yes,
maybe?
I actually just sent in my master's application last week.
Congratulations. Yes. Do you know where are you looking at?
Here, actually.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do in history, but with the baby and everything, it's hard to. So I'm doing the online program, educational psychology. So I do want to teach one day. So I'm hoping that will kind of give me the background and knowledge to help teach a little bit
absolutely. Better. That is so exciting. Mm-hmm. And so that's another good segue. You just had a baby. Mm-hmm. How is that going?
It's in a lot.
That's awesome. You said he's 3 months?
Yes.
That's so exciting. How has that transition been for you all?
Pretty hectic at first.
That's kind of a dumb question. Yeah. Has it been super easy? I mean, probably not.
But we're kind of getting the hang of it now.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's super, super exciting.
Okay, yeah, so definitely like logistics is what went worse. You have crappy logistics, everything is going to fall apart. But so taking ammo a lot, we wake up about 4:30 in the morning. We have to go to like an ammo supply point, and that would probably take about 3 hours of just getting all the initial ammo. I carried anything from like rifle ammo, machine gun ammo, to explosives. So it could be kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
At times, driving explosives around on bumpy roads that kind of go like this. Yeah. And then bringing food a lot. We went to California for some training, and it was about a month-long exercise. It was during Thanksgiving. And I remember we didn't get our Thanksgiving meal till like 11 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Because it was like freezing cold by then too, so it wasn't even really good. But yeah.
Wow. How do you feel like, I mean, you've been a history buff your whole life. Do you feel like having that background knowledge, or I think that understanding history is like a certain skill that people kind of develop over time. How do you feel like that influenced maybe not necessarily your time while in service, but maybe your outlook on certain events or certain things while you were in service?
I think it's definitely made me kind of relate to the soldier during like certain time periods, because soldiers really haven't changed from the beginning of time. There's them joking, screw jokes or anything like that. That's something they did all the way back to Roman times, really. Like we were, They Shall Not Grow Old, which is a World War I documentary by Peter Jackson. And like just seeing some of the footage of the soldiers joking around with each other and messing with each other, I'm like, that's the same stuff that we experience now and they'll experience from the time the soldiers. So
did you feel set apart in any way, given that you had maybe a little bit of a stronger understanding of history than others? I feel like the average American, at least, doesn't typically have as detailed an understanding of a lot of history as they maybe think that they do. I mean, like when I was in school, we never had like an official unit on anything that had anything to do with World War I, World War II. Like it was very random and it depended on what classes you took. So do you feel like you kind of saw that discrepancy between your peers and yourself yourself?
I'd definitely say so. Even like growing up with me being a big history nerd, we would gloss through certain time periods that are very important in history, like World War I is very forgotten about. And it's probably one of the most pivotal wars that we still see ramifications to this day. So
Absolutely. And you said that when you, a lot of your collection kind of spans from Civil War to World War I. What time period do you feel like you're the most interested in, or maybe you resonate with the most?
World War I is my big thing. So I collect a lot of mainly Tennesseans from World War I, but I've been recently getting into World War II, the Pacific Theater. More recently, I was in the 1st Cavalry Division when I was in the service. So I've been kind of researching them throughout the war, their war in the Pacific.
Yeah. Do you see, like, considering that was, I mean, you have that parallel, what parallels do you kind of see? I don't know how I want to word this. Like, what connections do you make to what you've learned about it in the past versus your own experiences?
I guess like much of the personal effects, like letters, some of the stuff they talk about is the stuff I talk about, like talking about crappy food they hate. Yeah. So one thing I really related to more is my great-grandfather. I looked up to him a lot, and that's the reason I kind of served. So he served from 1920 to the 60s. So he served quite a big chunk of time, which I've been meaning to get some of his stuff over to you guys, which I plan on. And I feel like I understand him more. So I kind of remember him when I was a kid. He lived it to be 100.
Wow.
Yeah. And he, not to ramble on, but his grandfather fought in the Civil War, and meeting someone that knew someone fought in the Civil War meant so much to me as a kid, because you talk about going to town with him, riding on a horse and picking up candy with his, he was wounded in the Civil War, so picking up some candy with his pension from the Civil War, which you can't beat that.
That's awesome. It's crazy to have not only like lived such a long and full life, but to be present and involved in like every turning point of world history throughout the entire 20th century. It's just, that's kind of, not everyone can say that they did that and that they participated. That is awesome.
He served in a mounted horse unit, which was one of the last mounted horse units. So he transitioned from that all the way to tanks, which is complete.
It's like hard. It's like those things that you'll see online where it's like Cleopatra is closer to us than she was to like the birth of Jesus or something, and it's like, wait, that can't be right. It's like hard to concept. Maybe that example's not right, but that idea of it's kind of hard to conceptualize that history doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a lot of things happening at once, and people can see that continuously, even though it's hard for us in our minds in the contemporary to kind of separate that. So that is super, super exciting. That is so interesting.
I really like this idea though that you're bringing into it. I mean, you're talking about family connections with history. So how do you like think about your own family's history with the history that you want to teach and the right and those combinations? Like, how does that really bring forth your own, like, what you think about history and how that informs your thought upon the historical profession at large?
It helped me understand history more, because sometimes I can put a face to it. Like if we have like an image from that person, we know what they look like, what they thought. It makes me connect to my ancestors more. Of course, we all have skeletons in a closet. Like I had a Confederate ancestor, which I'm not too proud of, but you can't change that, of course. Yeah. Luckily, though, we had a Union on the other side, so I guess it makes up for it.
Yeah. And I don't want to like hone in on this too much, because Morgan knows I will talk everyone's ear off about it, because this is my honors thesis is about some of my own family history that I'm also, maybe, I don't know that I wouldn't say I'm not proud of it, but it's definitely dicey. It's not, I'm not like Whippy, but I had a great uncle who killed a man in 1918. He served at Camp Kearney, San Diego, and later claimed that he never knew it was wrong to kill, because he grew up in the mountains of southern Appalachia, where that was a socially acceptable thing to do. And so my thesis does not necessarily talk about whether or not he truly knew this, or whether or not it speaks for the whole of Appalachia, but rather his case is a really interesting example of how we should tell history. And I would argue, and others, I mean, this is not a concept that I'm inventing, history should be told from a very empathetic lens, almost, of, I'm not trying to make excuses for the actions of a certain individual, but you have to have the empathy of understanding in order. We're never going to just be able to things don't just happen. People typically don't just do things. There's a lot of context and nuance that builds up to that and leads to that. And I think that is a really, really important aspect of history. And so I think that what you do is a great example of living that, almost, of individualizing these people and being able to look at them through an empathetic lens. How do you feel like you would want to bring that into a classroom?
I guess definitely like bringing in my own collection and showing students up front what they wore, what they look like, because like books typically look at generals, battles, and they don't go down to the individual soldier, but the soldier is what made these battles possible to win. So,
do you know what I may have asked? I don't know. I don't think I have asked this. Do you know what like age range are you looking to do secondary ed or?
I'd love to do college one day.
Yeah,
that's my goal. So.
Yeah, I was secondary ed for a little while, but then I also kind of decided, like, I think that if I wanted to teach this, I would want to teach older people who I can converse like this with.
Yeah, in school, I tried doing like younger education, and just wasn't for me.
Yeah, it's really making those connections with kids, especially, can be really, really difficult. I think the level that some of us may want to do or may not want to do. So I think that's super, super exciting.
I'm such a person that wants to go into the detail, and you really can't do that if you have to follow a certain set of curriculum.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is another, that was like a big thing that kind of turned me off of, like, I don't know that I want to pursue this because, and I think that again, speaking of the question I asked earlier about discrepancies between your knowledge and your peers, I think that the school system in a lot of ways allows for failure in the teaching of history. Not necessarily the school system obviously is not perfect and has a lot going on right now, but just following curriculum that changes so constantly. Like, I remember when I was in high school, there would be points of like, we would follow the curriculum, and then the next year they would have changed the curriculum, and it's like, well, you have to know all of this based on the curriculum we changed. You should know it, but I wasn't doing that curriculum last year, so I don't know it. So there's a lot that kind of gets rolled over or kind of left to the side or misrepresented very quickly just to kind of squish it in.
A lot of times, like the football coach, and he had no clue what he's talking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of us did have people, and I think that also, this is maybe a hot take of mine, I think that teaching in general, but like specifically teaching history, I feel like not anyone should just do it or be able to do it. I think that it's like, I don't want to like equate it to being a doctor, something like that, because it's different, but you have to want to do it, and you want to have to do it correctly.
You have to have a love for it, that kind of thing.
You do, and you have to be very intentional, I think. And so seeing people like you who have that passion and have that intention that want to do that, it makes me feel a lot better in a world where we see the humanities disappear and the importance of history disappear more and more every single day.
That's kind of one of the reasons I do want to teach, because it's getting put to the wayside these days. So I'm hoping, I know I probably won't make a big change, but a small change is my goal. So
yeah, it's the ripple effect that'll do it. You have one good teacher in school, and that ripples out to, that's how I think everybody kind of gets into these things, is even if it's not a teacher, a family member that you didn't really get to know for very long but had an impact on your life that kind of leads to these ripple effects. I just think that that's so very powerful and very, very interesting. Are you looking at any other, you said you applied to UT, are you looking at any other programs?
Not right now. So I do want to get my doctorate is my next step, definitely here in history. And so my life goal was to write books and be published. That's something I've wanted since I was a kid. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you should definitely, if you do get into the master's program, which my fingers are crossed for you, you should totally look into working with the center and doing that, because
I'm thinking about that.
Because that's always a really good opportunity to be able to do that. And that's also something that I love about the center, is that it kind of provides that space for, I say this tentatively because I should have by the time I came to the center. By the time I came to the center, I'd never really done a large scale research project of any kind, especially not on my own. And so it was a really, really big and really, really pivotal learning moment for me. And I think that is so important to offer students, especially in a historical context.
Well, I'd love this going to college. It would have been the world to me.
Yeah, I wish that I would have found out about it sooner. And I hear so many people that are like, I would have gotten involved in this so much sooner if I knew that was an option for me. It's always really, really, I think, helpful for people. It's so exciting. Do you have anything else?
So before we wrap up, you mentioned this awesome camaraderie between fellow soldiers. Do you have any stories that you want to share?
Oh, yeah, that would be a good one.
Or any other unique experience that happened? When did you serve? What was your time frame as well? I don't think we asked that.
Yeah.
I was active duty 2016 to 2018. And my first roommate made a big impact on me. His name was Evans. He took his life, unfortunately, a couple years ago, and that's kind of made me want to help veterans more a little bit. So he's definitely, I think about him constantly. So that is a big problem, unfortunately, in the military. Like, when I tried getting mental health myself, I was put to the wayside and told to soldier up.
So I feel like that's one of those subjects to where it's, I think, really necessary to discuss, but can be really difficult to discuss. And I feel like people know, like, I don't think that it's any secret in society in the U.S. that veterans struggle and that they're not given the resources and help that they need, but it's still something that people don't talk about, or they allow to be kind of pushed to the side. But it's far too frequent. And so obviously that influenced you a lot. How do you feel like your role kind of allows you with what you do to kind of be that advocate, or maybe be that voice for people?
I've been not every day, but I get to help veterans, and they'll come to me with like personal issues they need someone to vent to, and that means a lot to me.
That's awesome. What, for anyone watching who might be a veteran who's struggling, or who might know a veteran who's struggling, what advice would you give to them in terms of just general advice, but then also resources?
Definitely reach out, to your guys you served with, guys or girls you served with. Reach out to them and just communicate with them. Said, I made a mistake. I'm not keeping up with people. And then Evans took his life, and I didn't talk to him for like a year in between that. And honestly, I still struggle. I feel crappy for that to this day. And I guess just having that bond after you get out, getting involved in other organizations like American Legion or something like that.
That's awesome. I'm very sorry to hear that, and I'm very sorry for your loss. That's one of those things that you don't really have words for in life. Is just very tragic and heartbreaking, and just far too common. So I appreciate you sharing that, and for working not only just in your role as an advocate against that, but for even just speaking out and talking with us about it today. As much as people maybe don't like to talk about it, or it's hard to talk about, it needs to be talked about for sure.
It's made me kind of pivot my own research to kind of the veteran after the war. We do focus on wars and battles so much. But I guess after how America treated them, or any other nation, kind of the resources they had, we've evolved a lot as a nation with how we do treat veterans and how we take care of them. So if I had it my way, I'd love to teach a class on how America and the veteran kind of treat each other.
Yeah, that would be really, because there's a lot that can...
Yeah, I can go from the bonus army to all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I actually write, in my thesis, I write about the bonus army. My great uncle Halder makes an allusion to it in one of his letters.
Oh, that's cool.
It's pretty powerful, and it's stuff that, again, we're not really taught in schools, but history, I don't necessarily think that history repeats itself, but I do think that history has a pattern.
It does.
And so it's really, really interesting to get to see those patterns kind of repeat themselves throughout history and look for them in the contemporary, even though it is hard for us to analyze what's happening currently in a historical mindset. There are still definitely parallels. And so I think that would be a really, really interesting take to have on that.
So I guess like even serving my brief time I did myself, I still kind of feel behind my own peers that like I graduated high school with, and that's been a common thing for all military guys since the beginning of time. Like whenever I first went to college, someone asked me why I was so old, and I kind of just like, even though I wasn't much older than them, it kind of stuck with me a little bit. That's something kind of threw me off. So one more thing, sorry.
It's okay.
They'll probably come to me whenever I'm walking out the door.
No, that's okay. And I will, and like that, you're definitely not alone in that. We've had several interviews with other veterans who have also spoken at length about being a student after your service, in age gap, and not even age gap, but experience gap, and the things that you've, responsibilities that you've had, so on and so forth. I think that traditional students maybe don't recognize that, and they don't see those gaps, but I feel like that is definitely something that you're not, that is very common, and that you're definitely not alone in.
I definitely struggled. Like my grades were not good in college, to be quite frank, so I'm fingers crossed on the master's program. But yeah, so I mentioned that in my introduction letter to them, that I struggled with mental health throughout college. So I guess like me in this role now, I can help the veteran while they're in college and kind of catch it before they have bad grades or anything like that.
Absolutely. And I don't know how you would feel. I mean, obviously, I don't know what your thoughts on this would be, but something that I always try and be mindful about, because I feel like I've seen it with other people I know, people I've interviewed, so on and so forth, is I feel like a lot of veterans maybe feel as if emphasis is more heavily placed on what they did than who they are as a person before or after their service. Do you feel like that's like a common problem, maybe not even just to yourself, but maybe that you see within your peers?
Not with veterans per se, well, with veterans, but veterans don't say this, but like I never went to combat. And someone I worked with when I first got in the military said, well, you didn't really serve.
Yeah.
And I'm 70% disabled at age 21 back then. And it felt weird being that disabled. I got hurt in the military. And I feel like it took me a while, like my service was not validated, which I don't care about being thanked or anything like that. That's kind of corny to me. But just like hearing, oh, you didn't really do anything, kind of takes you off guard.
Yeah.
So you don't pick where you go or what you do. You just do it because that's what you get asked to do. So
absolutely. And I feel like for anyone watching who maybe don't know anyone personally very well as a veteran, so you're not used to like having these conversations, because I know it can sometimes feel kind of corny to be like, thank you for your service, like, you know, asking questions. You don't want to be invasive, but I think it's fine to ask questions and that sort of thing, but don't forget that this person is an individual before this and after this, and that there's other things in your life and that their lives that they're going to do and that they're going to accomplish, and that they amount to more than whatever their service looked like, whether it was combat, whether it wasn't, so on and so forth.
So it was a brief time period in my life, and I'd rather talk about other people's history all day than talk about myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think it was maybe Tom Cruise, the director, who had brought that up, if I'm not wrong, in his interview on this kind of idea of like, well, did you really serve, like based on whether or not you saw combat and how harmful that idea or that narrative is. Yeah.
It's definitely out there that people treat like crap because you didn't you can't control where you go or anything. So
and I think that we need to maintain an understanding of, like you said earlier, it's the everyday person that's not going to be in the history book necessarily, but they're the ones that are making these things happen, whether or not they're doing so in a way that you think is entertaining or interesting or what have you. I mean, like these small, seemingly mundane acts of service are just as equivalent to larger, more grand acts of service, and they're all extremely important in making that machine continue to move and continuing to develop further. And I think it's just really important that we keep that in mind and that we honor that. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in for this conversation with James Angel. We'll see you next time. Thanks.